Welcome to another episode of the Almost Awakened podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Bill Reel,
And I am Teresa Hobbs.
and we're excited to be with you today. In this episode, we want to talk about gaslighting. And so I'm going to put up here on the screen the slideshow that we've got to show you tonight. But gaslighting is this thing. I will define it first. We'll go into how it got its name. We've got several areas to talk about examples of it, the harm that it does. I think this is a big deal because this happens in unhealthy relationships. If you get a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a spouse, sometimes a parent relationship, and maybe a coworker or whatnot, but you'll run into this, I think, a million times in your life where people want to change your reality because it would be too difficult for them to be accountable to whatever it was that happened. But also systems do this to us. So religions and other groups or spiritual systems, gaslighting often happens in. And so we'll go through all of this tonight. We're glad you're with us. Please hit the like and subscribe button. We appreciate everybody being here. The first slide I want to show here, Teresa, is just a definition. On the left is just a standard definition for it. On the right was a therapy entity, and they were putting down their definition of what is gaslighting. So I'll just read this. Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation. And you and I were talking about this before the show started. There is manipulation that is not gaslighting. Gaslighting is one form of psychological manipulation. So gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation where someone or something, a system, causes another person to doubt their own memory, perception, or judgment. The aim is to destabilize the individual and gain power over them by making them question their reality. And so I'll just read this other definition so that way we've got two of them to work with. Gaslighting is a specific kind of emotional abuse that involves simultaneous attempts to convince a person of something untrue while also suggesting that they were wrong, crazy, or not seeing things clearly. Beyond normal persuasion, gaslighting is the intentional act of misleading someone and using manipulative or deceptive tactics to undermine their perception of reality. In relationships, gaslighting is usually a recurrent pattern of behavior aimed at breaking down the person's ability to criticize, question, or challenge the other person now and in the future. And systems do that too. They break down our ability to criticize them, to question them, to challenge that system or the leaders within it. And it's interesting, this term came out because of a play first and then a movie. And I've watched the movie. I thought it was important, being in the space that I'm in, that I take in the movie. It's not all that great of a movie. It's an old movie, 1944. Originally, there was a play in 1938. And I'm not going to say I remember the details of it exactly, but the general gist was that there is this couple, a man and a woman. The woman is very innocent, very, to some degree, trusting. And her partner is a very unhealthy human being. He is in it for the money. He ends up going up in the attic of this residence that's above like their home. And he's trying to find, I think, her family's wealth. It was like the coins or the gold bricks or whatever it was of the lady who lived there before. And I have a memory that she was related to the woman in the movie. It's the reason why he partnered up with her, was to have access to this space. But he would go up there, and when he was up there, he would turn the gas light on so he could see. And by doing that, it would dim down the gas light in the other residents around the place. So every time she would hear noises upstairs, her gas lights would go from the intensity that they were, and they would diminish. But when he would come back, she would question him, and he would just deny that he was up there. And so the term came from this movie. The word comes from 1938 play, Gaslight. Here they say, the husband manipulates his wife into thinking she's losing her mind by dimming the gaslight lamps in their home and then denying the lights have changed when she points it out. Over time, she doubts her senses and even her sanity. And he adds to it. He says, man, you've always had this problem where you've been on the very edge of insanity. And so she starts to think it's her. She believes that she's the one going crazy. Over time, she doubts her senses and even her sanity, which is exactly what manipulators aim to create. So I thought what would be interesting, and the reason we're covering this topic tonight, you and I have talked about doing a series on the Almost Awakened podcast where we go into various kinds of mechanisms that people and systems use to abuse a human being or a group of human beings. And we thought gaslighting would be an easy one to go into first. And so here we are tonight talking about it. We wanted to split this up into ways that individual human beings gaslight other human beings, and also how spiritual systems and its leaders gaslight the members or people belonging to that system. And so we'll start off first with the ways that a human being gaslights another human being. And I made a little list here, and then I wondered if maybe you wouldn't mind sharing a few examples or some thoughts you have on how this plays out in personal relationships. But 5 categories of gaslighting in personal relationships: rewriting the past. So the gaslighter denies or twists shared memories, making the other person doubt their own recollection. That never happened. You're imagining things. You're remembering it wrong. And I should note, sometimes we do remember things wrong. Sometimes we do have a memory of something happening. I remember an instance in a family where the youngest child in the family had a very distinct memory of being involved in an incident that the other kids and parents were involved in, except they weren't born yet. But because that story had been told over and over and over again in the family, this person has a literal recollection. They have an absolute recollection of being there and experiencing it as if they lived it, when in reality they weren't. So there can be mistaken memories too, but gaslighting is when something actually did happen and the person is trying to convince you that it didn't. Number 2, dismissing evidence. When confronted with proof, text, screenshots, receipts, the gaslighter waves it away or reframes it as meaningless. That doesn't mean what you think it means. You're overanalyzing. Number 3, reframing harm as care. The gaslighter reframes controlling or abusive behavior as love, concern, or necessary correction. I only get upset because I care about you. If I didn't love you, I wouldn't try to change you. Number 4, blaming the victim. Any negative reaction or to mistreatment is spun as the other person's fault. Too sensitive, too emotional, too irrational. You're too sensitive. If you weren't so dramatic, I wouldn't have to act this way. And then the last one here, and this doesn't necessarily mean these are the only 5 ways it happens. These are just the most prevalent ways that it happens. Number 5, contradicting without admission. The gaslighter gives inconsistent messages, says one thing today, the opposite tomorrow, and insist that the other person is confused for noticing. I never said that. You're twisting my words. So even though the person is contradicting themselves, they constantly are imposing on the other person that it's just a misunderstanding on their part. There isn't really a contradiction. Your thoughts on gaslighting in personal relationships, and maybe some examples for the audience to sort of grasp how this works itself out in real time.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get into some of the ramifications, but first I'll just give a couple of examples. And one of the things here, it says that it's something that consistently happens. There's a pattern that someone will play out. So people who gaslight tend to be they tend to do it a lot. So they're people who tend to not be capable of being accountable for their actions and don't like being called out on things. So I was in a relationship over a decade ago, and I saw a pattern of behavior with the person I was dating. You know, we all sort of worked together at the same engineering firm. And so I was privy to their other, relationships and friendships and things like that. And there was a woman that my boyfriend kept going to lunch dates with, and I was trying to be a really open-minded, secure person. It was a new relationship, and I hadn't had a lot of them, and so I didn't want to be seen as insecure or whatever. But the behavior was so obvious that it seemed like something was really going on, and so they'd go on these 2-3 hour gym dates or lunch dates in the middle of work. There was a lot of instant messaging, just a sense of closeness that didn't seem normal. And the person that this was happening with was someone who had, on some level, betrayed me. I found them not to be a very honest person. And so I had backed away from that relationship. And so I was concerned just because of who this person was. And every time I would ask questions about what was happening, I would say, like, what's going on here? This doesn't seem right. I was told that I was imagining things. It wasn't what I thought it was. I was told that this person really wanted to, fix our relationship and really be my friend and all this kind of stuff. And so I dismissed my own knowing. I had gut instincts. I had evidence in front of me that really showed that something unusual seemed to be happening. And then, like, there's a point when you just sort of like shut it off because you're like, well, it must be me. Again, I don't want to be perceived in this way, so I'll just be cool about this. And then, months later, it turned out that there was a relationship happening, and the blow to my system was immense. Like, it was such a deep traumatic experience to find out that the reality that I sort of like knew and dismissed and shut down was really the truth. And it flipped my whole system upside down and created a really severe trauma around that. So it's a very abusive experience, and yeah. So I want to talk about more about like how this affects people and sort of what it can bring up when you've noticed you've been through or you're in a pattern of gaslighting with another person.
Yeah, I think it is habitual. You pointed out that this tends to be a habitual behavior. If someone who is gaslighting tends to do it on a regular basis, and there's a reason behind that. They want to be unhealthy. They want to make unhealthy decisions. They want to carry out unhealthy actions, cheating on a partner, for instance, that you just spoke to. And so the only way they can get away with it without ending the relationship, if the other person won't tolerate that, is to lie about it happening,
Yeah.
to do it over and over again. It also causes a distrust, like you just said, my bells are going off. My gut's telling me something. The whole point of gaslighting is to get you, the other person, to distrust themselves so that the abuser can continue to get away with their unhealthy behavior. If they can convince you that your reality isn't in fact reality, then they can continue to do their unhealthy thing and make it your fault for misunderstanding it when you actually are acknowledging that it is what you think it excuse me, that it is what you think it is.
Well, what it does, it suppresses. So, you have your version of reality, and you know what you've seen, but somebody's telling you that's not truth. And there's almost like this intense pressure you're holding inside. There's a stress reaction that your body actually goes through when you are engaging with somebody like this, because you're having to dismiss your own truth and you lose connection with yourself. You almost literally disconnect from your own knowing. So you start to, all the small whispers you have or all the other ways that you're looking at reality, you start to question yourself. You second guess everything. You lose your own sense of truth, and it's really, really damaging. And that's what happened to me, to the point that I kind of lost connection to who I even was. And this relationship ended up going on for many years. And I continued in this pattern with this person over and over again, even after there was that betrayal. Anytime there were things that resembled that, like, texting a female friend or something like that. Whenever I would find out about it, it was the same thing, dismissing it. I was being overreactive. When was I going to get over the original betrayal? Stuff like that. It was awful, and it did a number on me. And so, again, because this is something that happens, this tends to be a pattern with people. People can get locked in and stuck in relationships like this, into these patterns of control where they really lose connection with themselves. And yeah.
Yeah. The whole, whether it's an individual or whether it's a system, the whole set of behaviors that are intended to gaslight you are meant to make you not trust your intuition to the point where if I don't trust my intuition, then it feels like maybe I'll be wrong if I criticize that person. Maybe I'll have jumped the gun if I point out the mistakes of that person. And so this behavior of gaslighting is intended to make us distrust ourselves to the point that we feel it's too risky to call the other person out, just in case we actually are not perceiving reality correctly.
Yeah, and you become submissive to the person or the system.
Yeah. So I'll put this back up here and just acknowledge that those are the ways that happens in personal relationships. And then the ways it happens in a high demand religion. So sort of the same list of things, but it plays out a little bit differently. So rewriting history, leaders deny or downplay earlier doctrines or statements. And I share examples here from several different religions. By the way, I talked to you about trying to eliminate some of these and narrow them down. And then I went back and looked at them, and I think they're so good that I couldn't do that. So leaders deny or downplay earlier doctrines or statements, and tell members that they are misinterpreting or that it never happened the way that critics say. They dismiss evidence as Satan's work. Members who discover uncomfortable truths are told their doubt comes from Satan, not reality. If you feel unsettled reading history, that's not truth. That's the adversary confusing you. Reframing abuse as faith testing. Victims of spiritual or sexual abuse are told that their experience wasn't abusive, but an opportunity to grow spiritually. The Lord allows trials for your growth. Maybe you're interpreting it wrong. Blaming the victim. When someone points out harm from teachings or policies, leaders insist the problem is with the member's faithfulness, not the system. If you were living worthily, you wouldn't feel hurt by this. And conflicting messages with no admission. Leaders promote contradictory teachings, follow the prophet versus prophets are fallible, and then suggest the member is wrong for noticing the contradiction. There is no conflict. You just don't understand enough. So there's that. And I wanted to go through each of these just because, I spend so much of my time and energy in this religion space. I want people to understand the damage that this does, both when systems do it and when other humans do it to each other. But and there's 5 categories I listed, but I go into only 4 of them. And I'll just share maybe a couple of examples from each, but there's more than 1 or 2 examples on each of these slides. Feel free to pause the video and read these as you want to. So in rewriting history, the LDS Church, so for over a century, Black men were barred from the priesthood and Black families were excluded from temple ordinances. Leaders explicitly taught racist rationales, and they taught them as doctrine. They said, it's not that we assumed, the leaders of the church taught from the pulpit in official letters and whatnot. This is in Mormonism, that the race ban and the reasonings behind why that ban existed were taught as doctrine. And then you get in 2013 in the Race and Priesthood essay, the church states, quote, "Today, the church disavows the theories advanced in the past that Black skin is a sign of divine disfavor or curse." The reason this is gaslighting is because you're telling the members essentially, oh, no, that wasn't doctrine. I don't know where you got that. I'm not going to spend the time helping you understand that you actually got it from us. Instead, I'm just going to explain that, yeah, maybe a leader here or there said a thing. It was never doctrine. It was the theories that were promoted by some people here or there. And then so you as a member are left going like, no, I'm pretty sure I was taught that was doctrine. I'm pretty sure I've seen leaders in official capacities, in official spaces, say as much. And so then you're called to question your reality. In the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Jehovah's Witnesses were taught that the world would end in, actually it was like 1890 something, 1994, I think. But then again in 1914 and then 1925 and then 1975, members sold their homes. They postponed life plans in expectation that Christ was coming again. And then later publications claimed that the organization never set specific dates, only that some members read more into the prophecies than what was intended. And so blaming rank and file for misinterpreting predictions denies the clear published statements promising Armageddon in those moments. So there's that. Dismissing evidence as Satan's work. And this is horrible too. Neil Anderson, LDS Apostle, says the negative commentary about the church will increase as you choose not to be offended and help those around you do the same. You will not be deceived by the evil one's attacks. Now, the Watchtower does it too. Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower, has often warned against apostate material. Quote, "It is not by accident that the apostates direct their attention to those who are young or who are new to the faith. Satan is behind such propaganda." And this hurts people because even if you need to believe that your religious system is the one true system, you would also, again, talking to everyone out there, you would also agree that all the other systems. So if you believe Mormonism is the one true faith, then it seems that you would have to agree that the Jehovah's Witnesses are a false church. And if all the false churches are notifying their believers that any information that they come across or any effort by someone who's deconstructed their faith in that system and no longer believes in it, and who is trying to help others come to an awareness that that system isn't true, if all that system does is label those people as bad, minions of Satan, deceived, and then strongly suggest that you shun them and that you not trust anything they say, then it seems we would all grasp that it would be very difficult for a believer who is convinced by their leader's rhetoric, that believer would have a hard time figuring out that their church isn't true. And so you mess up somebody's ability to go with their intuition, sort through the data, ask critical questions, examine the logic and rationale of an argument, and figure out whether that system is true. And then the believer, I just want you to notice, if any believers out there are listening, that you'll make a unique excuse for why that rhetoric works inside your own system, but which you would agree is not healthy in figuring out the truth in another system. And so that happens as well. And there's other examples there too in Scientology and others. Anyway, jump in at any moment you want to say something. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going.
I just want to say, I think it's interesting because, religions do not promote healthy spirituality. There's spirituality within religion, but religions are always, not always, but mostly, many of them are mostly unhealthy religions, especially the examples that you just gave. But they are promoting, obedience, punishing doubt, dismissing your lived experience. And then in here, they've got, the difference between that and healthy spirituality, which is healthy spirituality is going to welcome honest questions. It's going to acknowledge imperfection. It's going to hold accountability, and it's going to validate personal experience. And the difference between, like this religious system and healthy spirituality is that one actually wants a person to flourish and explore and be curious and open, and the other just wants them to be contained in the system itself so that the system can maintain control and perpetuate itself. It's not about the growth of the individual, it's about the growth of the system.
That's a really good, beautiful point. Not to belabor it, but to take it sort of the other side of the coin, a healthy system that really is the one true church, that really does have access to spiritual gifts that can notify you of which side of the argument is true, should welcome introspection, should welcome laying the data out, welcome critical questions, and allow people to ask questions, to walk ideas to their logical end, and be willing to go like, hey, let's just take our time. Let's look at what both sides say. Let's look at the merit of the arguments on all sides. And if you have the truth, you should trust that that would win out in a soft, healthy, back and forth, open, safe space for questioning type of conversation. And what you'll notice is in the systems, doesn't matter which one, in the systems that claim that they are the one true system, to a T, essentially, I don't know of any exception, to a T, they all require or demand some degree of distancing from outside material, distrust of information, and distrust of anyone who's attempting to inform those in the system that perhaps some of these things have been contradicted or aren't true or have been taught in ways that aren't honest representatives of how the history occurred. So that happens. All right. So the next one here is reframing abuse as faith testing. An example in Mormonism is women experiencing domestic violence. And by the way, this doesn't have to happen at the highest levels of the system. This can happen at like a local congregational level. It doesn't need to be something that is taught from the highest levels of leadership. This is just how humans in systems promote the system over the health of the individual by gaslighting them and making them doubt their own reality. Women experiencing domestic violence have been counseled by leaders to stay and to endure with faith. So abuse is reframed as an opportunity to develop patience and forgiveness or empathy, sometimes with promises of eternal reward. In Seventh-day Adventism, their founder and prophetess Ellen G. White described personal suffering, including domestic violence reports in the community, as discipline from God. And so if you're in an unhealthy situation where you're being abused and your gut's like, hey, I'm being abused, I need to get the hell out of here. Now this system you grow up in goes, don't trust your intuition here. This is a chance for you to learn discipline. This is a chance for you to learn patience. So now rather than getting out and away from abuse, you distrust your own gut and you stay in it only to be abused further and further. In the Catholic Church, clergy abuse survivors were often told by church officials that their suffering could be offered up as a way to share in Christ's suffering. Again, you keep calling on people to, rather than shine a light on the abuse that they incurred, and rather than draw attention to it and ask others to be accountable to it, you've asked them to feel helpless and to just sit in the abuse. To me, these are just horrific ways that systems gaslight people. Anyway, blaming the victim when someone points out harm from teachings or policies. Leaders insist the problem is with the members' faithfulness, not the system. In a Mormon Ensign magazine, this paragraph was there. Be aware that Satan can magnify our doubts or lead us to justify our sins. The Holy Ghost will prompt us with uncomfortable feelings when we sin, and when we can either repent or reject these promptings. As doubts arise, it may be useful to honestly ask yourself, is there something I am doing or desiring that is contrary to the gospel? So if you encounter something happening in your religion and here it's Mormonism, but if you encounter something happening in your religion that's unhealthy, or you encounter information that shows your system to not be true, maybe it's your fault. Maybe it's you that's got the problem. So now you doubt yourself. Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower does the same thing. How can we protect ourselves against false teachers? The Bible's counsel regarding how to deal with them is clear. Avoid them. So anybody who comes to you to tell you that maybe something in your system is off is immediately labeled as them being the problem, and you need to stay away from them. Hence, how could anyone ever come to you with true information that would convince you that your system isn't true if the only option you have is to distrust that source as being from the devil? So there's another one. So those are examples. And then in this slide here, I think we've all spent time, let me say it differently. A lot of people who have followed our work and the work of this channel have encountered gaslighting being talked about and examples being used. And we sense how it hurts us, but how gaslighting hurts people, here are some other ways. From a clinical trauma-informed lens, gaslighting does damage because it attacks core psychological functions. So cognitive dissonance overload. People perceive a contradiction and they feel that both things can't be true, but they're being told by the system to ignore the feelings that are warning them that something is wrong here, and to only go with their perception that the system must in fact be true. Cognitive dissonance is heavy and it weighs on people. And gaslighting causes a major overload of cognitive dissonance because your gut's telling you one thing, someone you care about or a system you care about is telling you another, and you're stuck in this liminal space in between where you can't figure out which is which. And you're being told to distrust what your gut is telling you. Fragmented self-trust. So doubt about their instincts, their memory, their intuition. When you tell someone they're crazy when they're not, and you do it over and over again, and they want to believe that the thing that's happening isn't happening, as you pointed to earlier, you will at some point doubt your own ability to make sense of what's going on around you. Chronic anxiety. The nervous system is always bracing. You use that phrase all the time, bracing. That your nervous system is always bracing for being wrong. Internalized blame. Shame grows because the group says you're wrong. The person assumes they are defective. And then relational harm. Victims struggle to trust authority figures, partners, even themselves later in life. So it's not just when the abuse is happening, but by being constantly gaslit and constantly second guessing your own reality causes you to go far off into the future, carrying that distrust with you of yourself and of others. And so when you actually did have an intuition that was correct, you move into later life continuing to distrust it.
Yeah.
And you have people who come into your life who actually do have some healthiness to them. And if you figured out you were gaslit then, even though you figured it out, you may go into the rest of your life distrusting people regardless of whether they are healthy and wise or not.
Yeah, and I think what makes it really it's really bad when it's a person that's doing it to you, but when it is an institution or when is a group of people who are affirming that your perception of something is wrong, then like that internalization of you're the defective one goes even deeper. And again, I talk about this like being disconnected from yourself. We have like natural intuitive senses that help us navigate the world. They help us know when something's right or wrong, when something is dangerous or not dangerous. And when we have learn to shut that off, we get really, really disconnected from our senses, from our body, because like that data, we no longer trust it. So we basically just become numb to it. And that affects so many different things. That can affect our health in different ways. That can affect our ability to recognize when something is dangerous or not dangerous, or when relationships are dangerous or not dangerous. A lot of people will end up in dysfunctional relationships over and over and over again because they don't have any ability to trust what they feel. So they can't read when somebody's not a good person. And so it's really, really damaging, especially if somebody sort of grows up in a situation like that where they aren't allowed to recognize their own truth, and their own truth isn't validated, and there isn't space for that. Again, these are healthy versus unhealthy family systems and religious systems and relationships, and all of them can be incredibly damaging to your ability to live a healthy, connected, life where you get to self-actualize and find out who you are and live in your own truth. And I feel like all people deserve that, but some of these systems set people up so they never have the chance to experience that.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that if an abuser is gaslighting someone effectively, and by effectively, I mean that the victim is second guessing themselves and disbelieving their own intuition and reality, that victim will have little choice, but in some form or manner, to disassociate,
Yes.
to separate some part of yourself from what your brain and body are telling you is the truth, but which the gaslighter has convinced you that it is not.
Yeah, and it can even be in my case, for example, I went through so many years of being with someone who continually gaslit me, and I had an internal knowing of what was true, but I kept dismissing it. And I think sometimes when that happens, again, it causes enormous amount of stress to be going on in your body. It hypersensitizes your brain because you're constantly trying to figure out, whether you're going to get in trouble because you're being told that you're wrong, whatever it is. And then your brain can misinterpret all that chaos in your body as something really dangerous or something serious that's going on. And it can turn on all kinds of different symptoms that are debilitating. Like in my case, I had extreme chronic fatigue syndrome and different pain syndromes. And a lot of people can have chronic pain that's connected to this. And it's a result of being disconnected from your body and having a lot of internal tension that you don't know how to manage other than to just disconnect, to cut it off. So there's a lot of things that can come from this, and it's hard talking about it. Actually, I wasn't expecting to have a response to this because I'm like, oh, gaslighting. We talk about that all the time. But as you're talking about these aspects from religion and spiritual gaslighting, I'm just thinking, in my experience with the Mormon Church, I don't think I didn't have enough information about Mormonism to have any questions about it. I just sort of went along with it. But when I think of the people who have gone through that process, who have been spiritually gaslit, who have raised their own questions or tried to point out something that wasn't right, and had an entire room of other people basically tell them that they were wrong, I can't imagine how that must feel for someone. I can't imagine how much damage that could do to a person. And I know, like, I wanted to ask you if you had any examples of this. Like, one thing about you that I think is really great is we'll talk about your experience, and you're a hard-headed, stubborn guy who kind of always knew your own truth. But I'm curious if there was any moment or any experience you had where you felt like you were gaslit and where it did affect you.
Yeah. What comes to mind is that when I first entered my faith crisis, yes, I knew on some level the problem wasn't me. I wasn't, in some ways, people describe it as they weren't experiencing a faith crisis. The church was having a truth crisis, and you just happened to be the one getting run over by it. But as I was having that experience starting to unfold, I was speaking up. I was having conversations out loud immediately. And at first, people were appreciative of it because leaders in the church at the local level, the stake presidency, so sort of regional leadership in Mormonism, they they were aware that we were in a moment in time where lots of people, more than ever before, were coming forward with questions about history and were losing faith and stepping away. And so I was at first looked to as like the expert, like, hey, Bill, you're dealing with this right out in the front lines. Would you come into our meeting and help all of us understand it? But the moment you speak to it honestly and you say, hey, the problem's not the people, problem's not, this guy over here or that gal over there for encountering troublesome history and losing their faith. The problem is a system that portrayed its history inaccurately, that whitewashed and hid its history. And we need to demand that the church make repairs and corrections. The moment you speak that truth to it, immediately you can just sense people step back, want you to step away, and want to create buffers and distance between you and them and your ability to communicate these ideas to anyone else out there. So I'll say that, but I'll also say, you point to the fact that I never let anyone make me the bad guy. I mean, they might tell whatever stories they want to, but I will stand up for myself. And it reminds me of Star Trek Next Generation, one of the movies where Captain Picard is kidnapped and he's held hostage and he's held in a room and he's tied up to a chair. And there's so many lights in the room. I think there's 3 lights. And they keep trying to convince him that there's only 2 lights. There's 2 lights. And the only way they let him have any brief moment of relief is if he acknowledges that he sees 2 lights. But when the rescue mission happens and he is just kind of on his last wit's end and he's broken down as they're dragging him out of the room to rescue him, he yells out, "There are 3 lights." You're not, he'll say what he needed to say to stay alive, but bullshit. And I think, again, not everyone is capable, but some people have it within them to just call bullshit to the system and not allow themselves to be trampled on. And I'll just note that certain situations, I mean, you may have family that are still in the church. You have to play the part of a believer. You may have a situation where speaking up will only add to the harm because the church has tied itself in cancerous knots to your family relationships, to your community relationships, to your business relationships. And so there may be a need for some people to pretend out there, but that also takes a toll on people. So I don't know if that answers your question, but those were the two thoughts I had.
Well, and I want to say too, you had the luxury. I know you were converted quite young, but you weren't raised in the church, and you didn't get that upbringing from the very beginning. And I think, again, people who are raised in that church then promote the same type of behaviors in the family system itself. And so I don't, I think it's common that, if your system of belief that and Mormons devote a lot of their time and attention to their church and their religion. And so if that's around you all the time, you are then likely to promote that behavior in your family system as well, not really allowing any of your children or family members to have their own autonomy. It's, everyone needs to sort of be on the same wavelength, the same page, have the same beliefs. And so I can imagine just thinking like a young child who has natural curiosity, how many times they may be, corrected or told what is, our truth over what they, a natural, honest curiosity. And it's a little sad, actually, to think about that.
Yeah, to take that in sort of off maybe into the weeds a tiny bit, just to recognize that, I've had people come up to me before and go, "Bill, you're so courageous." And my immediate response is, no, I was privileged. I'm a convert to the faith. I joined the church when I'm 17. I've got 17 years of my life outside of this system in a family that didn't base any of its beliefs or how we saw the world on what Mormonism gave me, right? So I have this other lens that I grew up with. I can only imagine when you're a child, you're a baby and you're born, the real project that life is to figure out what things mean. You have no meaning being made when you are born, and to be born into a high demand fundamental religious family or a system of some sort that is high demand fundamentalist means that you're going to grow up with a very particular lens about what everything means. Your emotions are defined in a way that the rest of the world goes, that's not how we define that. Your purpose in life is defined in such a way that the rest of the world goes, that's not our purpose. And so you grow up with all of these things being laid out for you, and you have no idea of any other way to think about the world. And hence it is so much more traumatizing and harmful when someone only has the lens of their system and they've been raised to love and trust that system. And meanwhile, that system and its leaders are manipulating, lying, deceiving, and hiding things. That's excuse my language, but that's a mind fuck in and of itself that is beyond understanding of anybody who hasn't experienced that.
Yeah, and it sets you up for the rest of your life to continually be drawn to relationships in that mimic that, because that's what that's what seems very normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you perceive as a safe boundary when it's really unsafe, but you don't know any better. What you've been trusted to uh, how you would decide what is true using emotions, for instance, rather than logic or critical thinking skills. Being taught to distrust the information of the world. I remember in a meeting once, somebody told me, you can't trust Wikipedia. Meanwhile, they wanted me to trust all the things that this religious system was saying. It's really crazy, but when you're in it, you're taught to believe it. It just seems like second nature to think that's actually how things work. So you really do mess people up. This slide here we still have up. I'll just note here on the right-hand side, am I being gaslighted? Some signs that may indicate someone is gaslighting you. I told you before we started recording, you were like, Bill, what is your goals for what you want to accomplish in this conversation? And I think everybody already understands the definition of gaslighting, at least most people listening do. But what I want people to walk away with is the ability to more easily notice it when it happens in their world, and to be able to do something about it. And so, am I being gaslighted? Here's some signs. You doubt your own feelings and emotions. You often defend the gaslighter's behavior. You start believing the negative things the gaslighter says about you. You always end up apologizing. You are afraid of expressing your real emotions. You feel alone, powerless, and passive. You question whether your feelings and experiences are accurate. You are often feeling confused, and you lie to friends and family to protect the gaslighter. So there's those.
I think
And
it's
then,
constant.
well,
Sorry,
please,
just
no,
I've always had this question of whether it's being gaslit or being gaslighted. So on this thing, they put it as, "Am I being gaslighted?" And I've always said to myself, "Am I being gaslit?" I don't know which one it is.
uh, the LDS Church in around Christmas time, they put up all of these vending machines, and what they call uh, that um, charitable action that they're doing is they call it Light the World.
Mm.
And I've seen so many places outside of the church that are criticizing the church call it Gaslight the World. Uh, sort of, but I also don't know. Gaslit seems like the right framing, but gaslighted is what they're using, and I think either one suffices. I think we get the point either way. In the next slide here, same sort of stuff. I don't want to belabor the point, but how you might be affected: second guess, avoid confrontation, over apologize, struggle with boundaries,
Mhm.
develop perfectionism. because someone keeps telling you you're wrong, you just keep trying to get it right. You keep trying to figure out what it means to do it the right way. To have your gut tell you the right thing, since you're constantly being told that whatever you are doing isn't right, whatever you are thinking isn't right, whatever you are feeling is going on isn't right. Signs you're a victim. You feel confused, have a hard time making simple decisions. You feel like you're not good enough and that everything you do is wrong. You feel less confident and more anxious than you used to be. You often apologize for what you are or what you do. You are feeling powerless and isolated from your family and friends. You feel hopeless and can't enjoy life. You are constantly second guessing. You are wondering if you are too sensitive. So notice that if you notice 2, 3, 4, 5, I mean, the more things you notice in this list, the more likely that some form of gaslighting is happening in your world. And then we get to this slide. What can help victims or what can help survivors? Practical healing steps that you could share with your audience. Reclaiming reality, journaling, therapy, safe conversations. So I think this is crucial. Journaling, I think maybe journaling isn't a way to get in touch with yourself and take some time to sit still with what's going on and process it. But I think when someone gaslighting you is being very effective, journaling may not be a super helpful way to do it. You may need other voices,
Yeah.
friends, family, therapists, people you trust to shoot straight with you. So that you can recognize that what you're being told is distorted reality actually is reasonable to feel and experience.
Yeah, I was gonna say that one's huge because that and even years, like, I think it was, like, 2 years ago, I'm sitting down across from a therapist, and I felt like I'd done a lot of work on myself, but I really needed those sessions just to be able to say, "Here's what happened. Can you please tell me, like, if this was legit or not?" Because I still didn't know. Like, I still couldn't put a label on what happened to me. And so I really needed to work through things like almost on a case by case basis to have somebody reflect back like, wow, no, that was really unhealthy. And you know what I mean? To kind of reclaim my own perception or truth. Because there was part of what happened to me in my situation was because my partner was so unwilling to be accountable for anything, he denied responsibility for everything, everything. And I felt like I was always being too harsh or calling out things that weren't real or whatever. And so I really needed somebody else to sort of like bounce that off of. Those were really great things. I want to go back to your list because there's so many awesome things on there. But I agree with you about the journaling thing. I think really it's really important to have um, and I would say a therapist is the best kind of person you're gonna find for that, because even sometimes your friends aren't gonna if your friends have similar experiences, they may not recognize what's healthy or unhealthy. So,
Yeah, find voices that you trust to shoot straight with you, and you may have to pay somebody to do that. You may have to pay another voice who goes, "I'm just gonna be a neutral party here, you say what it is." And so, like you said, therapists, coaches are, I think, really good for that. Somatic grounding, noticing bodily cues. Again, if you get the, uh, psychological education, you were pointing to this earlier in one of the conversations that we have, that one of our greatest things we can do as a coach for somebody is to help people gain the psychological education so that they can begin to notice things in themselves that they didn't notice before. And if people can be taught to notice the bodily cues that something is off, that it's not them, but it's what someone is doing to them, then people can start to figure out for themselves what it means to live from a place of uh, individual and internal integrity, and to not allow others to uh, alter or manipulate your own sacred story.
yeah.
So somatic grounding, heart rate, gut instinct, muscle tension as valid sources of truth. Number 3, reality checking circles, surrounding yourself with trusted people. Again, this is very similar to one. Reality checking circles, surrounding yourself with trusted people who affirm your experience. So you need people that when you show up as the human being that you are, You need people who go like, hey, your humanity is just as reasonable as anyone else in this group. Number 4, we mentioned already, psychoeducation. Number 5, rebuilding self-trust. Start with small decisions, what to eat, what to wear, and reinforce that their choices are valid. Um, I know people in my world that I wouldn't live the way they live, and if I were them, I would want to do something different. But also, I need to respect that they are their own human, and that their decision to show up in the world the way that they do is their right, and uh, their right to control their own autonomy, their own individualism, and often gaslighting as a form of control. That person, that abuser, is almost certainly showing up with other forms of control as well. And so helping people build self-trust, that they will trust their own decisions, and that may have to start off small, I think is a way to help people to learn to stand up for themselves. Boundary practice, role playing, saying, no, that's not my experience, to strengthen confidence in their voice. So if you have somebody, if you're being gaslit, you're being gaslighted, there are, maybe take an opportunity to sit down with someone you trust and role play using your voice to stand up for yourself, so that when you get into a moment where you need to do so, you're not just falling back on the habit of caving into this person who's doing this thing. And then compassion practices, replacing self-blame with self-kindness to undo the internalized shame. This is a big one, I think, after it's all said and done. You come out of the relationship, you need to figure out how to process what happened to you. And rather than beating yourself up for falling for what was done, instead to practice self-kindness and to realize that there are lots of reasons that are very reasonable for why victims fall into letting the gaslighter manipulate them, and to not live in a future of blaming yourself.
Well, and that self-compassion is such a big thing. Um, People need to learn to be kind and soft for themselves. It happens to so many people, and yeah, it's not your fault. And again, normalizing it and having the psychoeducation helps you to understand that it was a thing, not you. And the other thing I want to say about just boundary practices, those are really, really important because again, this being gaslit all the time or told that your truth or your reality wasn't real disconnects you from yourself, and um those felt senses that we have help us understand where our boundaries are, help us understand when somebody is coming too close, or when somebody has disrupted our emotional boundaries, or whatever it is. There's so many different ways that we connect, that are connected between your felt sense and understanding, where your safety is and where your boundaries are. And there is an exercise that Dr. Peter Levine does where he has people play around with boundaries. There's a couple different exercises. One is like a string exercise where you sort of put a string around your entire perimeter, and you get a sense of where your boundaries are, like and you feel into your body and find out where it starts to feel safe, where your general boundary is. And then there's another one where you start to just gently tap on your skin. And for people who've been disconnected from themselves, or they've been what is the word? Dissociated. You no longer even feel your body boundaries. So he has an exercise where you kind of just like tap on your hand, which seems really silly, but then you just let yourself know, like you feel into the sensation of tapping on your hand, and you let yourself know, this is my hand, like this is my hand boundary. And you tap all over your body to sort of reclaim your sense of self. And it can be really, really powerful for people to start understanding what their own felt sense boundaries are. And again, because we've been so disconnected from that, we don't even know sometimes. So you have to kind of start slow. And I love a lot of these things here, just even practicing, the role playing of, no, that's not my experience, or I hear you, this isn't my experience. We remember things differently. Being able to identify that just because somebody else has a different perception or is telling you a different experience, that you can maintain that there's a difference, but that yours is still true, and you can honor that. These are really good recommendations, actually.
Yeah, this list on the right, there's two sides of a coin here. One is that somebody who has been the victim of a gaslighter, an abuser who has a consistent pattern of gaslighting. These are the things that when you start to gain your voice back, when you start to be able to stand your ground and say, no, I won't tolerate this happening in my world anymore. These are the things that you can say, and we'll go over this list. But the other side of the coin is that a healthy person in conflict with you, in conversation with you, in discussion with you, will be safe for you to do these things. So it's an immediate sign if you practice these things, you say these things to someone that you perceive as gaslighting you, you'll be able to tell pretty quickly if they are gaslighting you by how they respond to you standing your ground and using your voice. So like you said some of these, I want to figure things out for myself. So there's a disagreement about what reality is, and that person is demanding that you trust them and their version, and you respond with, I want to figure things out for myself. Is that met with, oh no, you didn't? You're not gonna establish some sort of independence here? Or does that person say, absolutely, like take your time, process what's been said, ask any questions you want, and please, by all means, like go figure things out for yourself, and let's come back and talk about this in a way that honors that. The second one, we remember things differently. I've said this all the time. Most conflict in relationship on some level is somebody heard something wrong or someone said something wrong. Sometimes it's literal, like I said dog and I thought I said cat. You heard cat, but I'm just not convinced I said it. And I don't
Yeah.
believe I said it. And we're arguing now over it.
Yeah. What happened to us this morning, actually? We had a two. There was one thing I said and you interpreted it one way, and I left for an hour and came back, and you had done this thing that I didn't expect you to do because you thought that's what I said to do. It was really funny.
So that happens.
Yeah.
We misunderstand each other. We misinterpret. I might say a sentence and it means one thing to me, and I intended it to come across a certain way, and you heard it and it meant something else. And I could have used better words, or you could have used a different interpretation. And whose fault that is absolutely ambiguous and up for debate, especially if it's such a big deal to both people that they're both standing their ground and going, no, when you say this is how I take it. And well, you shouldn't take it that way. This is how I meant it. And if you're butting heads, it's a matter of two people who have experienced the world a different way. And so that sentence just falls on both of them differently. And so when you say we remember things differently, or hey, we just have to agree to disagree, the other person should give you that. And if they don't, then that says something about their ego or the unhealthiness in them. I hear you, but that isn't my experience. There's another response. I know my truth. I'm not debating it with you. I'm making this decision for myself. I'm telling you how I feel. Is that a problem? And if someone goes, yeah, it's a problem how you, well, that's a problem that someone can't let you feel your feelings. I feel like I'm not being heard and I want some space. Will that person not give you space? You're great about that, by the way. Anytime I've just said, hey, I just need some time to process what happened. I'm not in a place where I can resolve this right this minute. I need to sort of sit with myself, go over things in my head and process what happened, because often our logical reasoning about a conflict and can be resolved quicker than our emotional feelings about all of that. And we sometimes need some time to get in alignment with ourselves. So if somebody asks for some space and the other person won't grant it, that says something. Another response: this is my experience and these are my emotions. Yeah, will somebody not let you have your experience and your emotions? I get that you're mad and I'm angry too. Okay, that seems fair. Both people are upset.
Yeah.
Last one: I'm stepping away from this conversation. People should have a right because we all have been in arguments where we keep chasing the conclusion of the conflict down, hoping we'll fix it in the next rebuttal. And all it does is end up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you hating each other. Um, so at any moment, someone should have the ability to respectfully step away from a conflict and revisit it when things have settled down.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say about this too, and even about gaslighting in general, is that I think gaslighting comes from a place of somebody not wanting to be accountable for things, but gaslighting can also come from a place, especially if it comes up in arguments between two people, when somebody has a really rigid perception of life or thinks that things are black and white. So when two people may have two very different perspectives on something, and there is truth on both sides, somebody who has a more rigid perception of the world, and is less emotionally mature is, maybe somebody who is stuck in this black and white thinking. So when somebody comes, when they have a reality or a truth for them, and somebody else has a conflicting reality or truth, they may argue that a lot because of their emotional immaturity. And I think that that's not necessarily a sign that that person's bad or horrible or a narcissist. Um, but I think it's a sign of just emotional immaturity. And and I think it takes time to be able to develop the ability to recognize that two people can have two different perspectives or opposing views, and that you don't have to constantly be on the same page of one rigid experience or
Yeah,
perspective experience.
yeah. And to take that maybe a step further, uh, people, not everything that looks like gaslighting is. I think people can genuinely misunderstand each other. And one person truly is trying to help the other person understand that, no, I did not mean this that way. Or no, I didn't, I wasn't doing the thing that your gut said I was doing. That can be real too. I'll note that when you're in a long-term relationship and you have a lot of unhealthy history behind you, that even if somebody puts in the work to make growth and progress in how they show up, it's easy for them in a moment that resembles a past moment to trigger that person into what looks like gaslighting. And maybe they've done the work and they're not doing that anymore. So I'll just note that. And then I'll also note, I think it's the sort of what you just said, two people can be so immature and their communication styles can be so different that they really are experiencing and relaying with language and body language, words and body language, things that both sides are taking away very different narratives. And so I think people can be so incompatible that they are both experiencing completely different realities. And in that instance, one or both sides could easily perceive it as gaslighting, when in reality, there's just such a deep incompatibility
Yeah.
that they're never going to see eye to eye, and they're always going to misunderstand each other as things happen. So I
With
thought of that as well.
Yeah, and so one thing I just wanna say as far as, rebuilding, your sense of self, is being able to recognize that you don't have to you don't have to fit yourself into somebody else's box. So if you're in a relationship and you are recognizing that, that there's a, I don't know, a disconnect, uh, you get to honor yourself. You get to honor your own truth. You get to put yourself as the priority, and rather than trying to make the relationship fit or work for the sake of making the relationship fit or work. And I think as people continue to do the work to come home to themselves, to rebuild a relationship with themselves and their own truth and their own inner integrity, that's what happens. And that's why I actually think, a lot of people will tend to, they get in relationships, young, and then by their late 30s or 40s, they go through divorce. And I think it's because that's the point that people often start to emotionally mature and develop and recognize that they can start, like connecting to themselves and understanding their own desires and needs and wants and prioritizing that. As we sort of move through life and mature, we develop into a more individualist stage. I was reading you wrote this, you have a podcast or a website called Christ of Faith or Crisis of Faith.
Christ of faith. So the Jesus of belief or faith, not the historical Jesus who might have just been a ordinary rebellious zealot among the Jews.
Okay, so here you talk about the three, like these different stages of faith. And the first one is the faithful stage. And that's where people have a lot of this rigid black and white thinking and adherence to, there's this good and bad. There is this way to live life and so on and so forth. And that your truth comes from an external source. And then as you progress through the stages of faith, you get to this, dark night of the soul when you start to question things and it's not, you recognize things aren't quite as the way that you thought they were. And then you move through that into the individualist stage, which is where you get to start figuring out what's true for you, And again, this is the same process as coming into your own sense of self after you have either never developed a sense of self because maybe you grew up in a religious faith that sort of never allowed that development, or if you've gone through a sort of abusive relationship where you've been gaslit a lot, you get to come home to yourself and figure out exactly, what is your own truth and what's right for you. And then you get to the strategist stage of development, which is a really cool place where you are able to let people have their own truth and you have your own truth and what's true for you and you don't feel like you have to sort of fix it in other people. You can just let everybody kind of be who they are. And that's like true spiritual growth and true emotional maturity. So I thought these parallels were really interesting because I was reading this today and I was thinking about how that sort of tied into this concept of gaslighting and the ways that we sort of reclaim ourselves and move through this and heal from it. So I just wanted to point that out because I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, you used a word earlier, individuation, where people, sort of grow into their own autonomy and their own security in who they are, their own confidence in who they are. And it is, I think, a lot of times in that process, as you're pointing out, that a person sort of comes to awareness of what they should never have tolerated and won't tolerate anymore.
Yeah.
So I think there's great opportunities for people to grow and to learn and to develop into human beings who feel safer standing up for themselves, feel more secure in not tolerating the unhealthy people around them, don't need to give up parts of themselves in order to secure the validation or the love of someone else. And so I think it's really interesting to watch people grow into that. And hopefully conversations like what we're having here will be one part of a resource or part of a toolbox that helps people to do that. We're going to go in a little different direction now, Teresa. I wanted to make an announcement here and see what folks think about this, but I'm really excited. So this is an email that I got this morning. I have been for the last year, and I'll just note, Teresa is a trauma recovery coach. You have specializations in safe and sound protocol and in pain reprocessing therapy. And when you and I met, we've been together about a year. And when you and I met last October, you doing the coaching and helping support people who have chronic fatigue, chronic pain, who are dealing with trauma. And this is a field that I've been helping people out with as an amateur forever. And I thought, because I've always wanted to do this, and meeting you and seeing you do your work prompted me to take the next step and to jump into trying to get certified as a trauma recovery coach. And so I finally got an email this morning. I had turned in my last assignments, and I got an email this morning that said, "Huge congratulations." It says, "With great pleasure, I'm here to inform you have successfully passed your level 7 CMI qualification. Huge congratulations on your somatic trauma informed coaching and leadership diploma. You and I have been sort of hinting at this for a while. We've been announcing opportunities for people to connect with you and get some coaching, but we wanted to unveil today a website. This is awakenandthrive.org, awakenandthrive.org, awakenandthrive.org. And when you go to this site, this is an opportunity to see what kind of support and help that Teresa and I can be as coaches. So I am officially entering the space of being a coach to help people process trauma, whether it be religious or otherwise. Although I expect that I will see a large number of folks who have been traumatized by religion, things like gaslighting from a systemic lifetime of abuse by particular systems. But there's this in the website. I'll just note there's places where you can learn sort of what our specializations are, what you specialize in, what I specialize in. You can take the opportunity to work with either one of us as coaches, and you can click a link and book me as a coach. You can click a link and book Teresa as a coach. But you also have this really cool thing on the far right there. We're going to start a religious trauma and spiritual abuse support group. And I couldn't be more excited for this. And I think you and I bring such different skills to the table, and we communicate so well together that I think this is a really cool opportunity to put a group. I think we said we were going to cap this at 15 people.
Yeah.
Say what you want to say about that.
I was just going to say, so many people, coming out of deconstruct or being in the process of deconstruction, after walking away from your religious group, there's this huge chasm of emptiness because you lost connection to community. And also, I think this process for a lot of people is really isolating and lonely. And so I've had so many people talk about how much they would appreciate a support group. And so that's essentially what this is. It's going to be a religious deconstruction and religious trauma support group that you and I will both facilitate. And it's going to be a space mostly where people can share their own stories, where we can sort of normalize the process, where people can share the different stages that they're in their process. And Bill and I are both going to offer, different tools and things, but for the most part, it really is going to be a place where people can just feel safe to share what's going on, what's happening. I facilitated another group for people with chronic illness, and that's been an incredibly supportive space for people to talk about things that you can't just talk about at the water cooler at work or whatever it is. So I think it's something that's really needed, and I'm excited, and I hope that it resonates with people. We've tried to keep it really low cost so that people can feel like it's an easy thing to show up for. So we'll be doing a group of 15 that meets every other week. I think it's going to be Tuesday evenings, but that may change. We have to kind of check with our schedules. But so I hope that people who are looking for that place to sort of work through some of this stuff or feel a sense of connection, if you're interested in that and find that useful, we will put the links below so that you can know where to sign up for that.
Yeah. And so just to finish up there, awakenandthrive.org. This is the website. Just scroll down here. You've got support groups. So if you want to join a support group, just click the button. $60 allows you to meet with us twice a month. And so we're really excited to put this together. So essentially you get to have the two of us as well as other people who have been through similar kinds of things in their journey. And we can chat and talk about and share resources and support to help you to deal with the things that maybe have held you back, that have affected you, and to recognize that as others are part of that as well, that we can sort of all support each other and recognize that that you're not alone on this, that this is a real thing that we've experience being in a system that hurt us in some ways. And this is a great chance to get some support for that. So there's that. Also, there's one-on-one coaching. If you click that button, you'll go to a link where it shows what I'm trained in, what Teresa's trained in, and you can pick if you want some one-on-one coaching. You can pick which one is best suited to help you. And we're really excited to start seeing you, and excited for anybody who signs up for the group to create a cool experience with that. So I've rambled long enough. Anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
Nope. I'm excited. I'm excited as well. I'm excited to see what kind of a community we can create there, and look forward to whoever feels like that's a good fit for them.
Cool. And I think Tuesday nights will work great as well. So hopefully that'll be it. Otherwise, folks, this is the Almost Awakened podcast. Please like and subscribe. And folks, we do survive on donations. That's in the show links as well. So if you're willing to support this show, and we have a much smaller audience than some of the other things that we do on this channel, hence we really do need the support to keep this going and to keep bringing to you regular conversations that help you on your journey to, as you use the phrase, self-actualize, and to be more present with what you're experiencing, and to know of the cool things that are out there on this second half of life. Grateful for the folks who joined the show. Thanks for listening. And Teresa, thanks for all you do to help make this possible. Folks, we'll see you next time. This is the Almost Awakened podcast. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Almost Awakened podcast. For more tools, resources, and real talk about conscious living, visit almostawakened.org. That's almostawakened.org, your resource for waking up